Connectivity Study public meeting. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Stacy Hemby, and I will be going through a few meeting logistics with you before we get started. So just to let you know, this is an open meeting. Next slide, please. Just to let you know, this is an open and public meeting that is being recorded. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please enter your question in the chat section, which we will go through at the end of the presentation. If you or someone you know needs technical assistance or is experiencing any technical issues during the meeting, please connect with our team member, Rachel, via phone at 804-475-4815. We will begin the presentation. Once the presentation has ended, we will open up the meeting for questions and comments. During the presentation, everyone's mic except the presenters will be muted to avoid any background noise. If you think of a question during the meeting, there are a couple ways that you can let us know. I'll go through those in just a moment, but before doing that, I'd like to let you know about the closed caption option. WebEx does have automated system generated closed captions. And to access that during this meeting, you can click the CC icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. You can also access additional settings to adjust the appearance there. If you're using the mobile version, you can click the three-dot icon, scroll down and select closed captions and make sure that toggle switch is blue. Next slide, please. So going back to the ways that you can let us know that you have a question during the presentation or during the Q&A section, there are a couple things that you can do. One of the ways is that you can raise your hand. This indicates to the project team that you'd like to speak. To virtually raise your hand, you can click on the reactions or the smiley face icon on the bottom middle of your WebEx window and click raise hand. If you joined via mobile app, click the three-dot icon, then raise your hand. And if you're dialing in, you can dial *3 and that will enable that function. Next slide, please. The other way to let us know that you have a question is to leave it in the chat. And to send a chat, you just click chat in the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx window. A new panel will open up for you. And then you can hit send to field. Just in the send to field, you just want to make sure you hit all panelists. Click the text box to type your comment and then press enter to send it. Once the Q&A begins, we will address hand raises and chats in the order received as best we're able to. And just the last thing, I know this is a lot, so the last thing is to adjust the layout of your screen. You can hover over the cursor between the video feed and the presentation, click and drag that slider bar to adjust the size of your staging window. And you can close open panels like your participant panel, your chat panel, etc., to maximize that space. So with that, thank you for your patience through that, and I'll turn it over to Preston.
All right. Good evening, folks. My name is Preston Judy. I am the project manager for the MLK Avenue and Marion Barry Avenue Safety and Connectivity Study. I'm going to be walking you through tonight where we've been with this project and introduce a couple of our project team first. I'm going to recap some of our public engagement, and we're going to get into our draft final recommendations. And so I want to recognize a couple folks. I won't be able to hit every name, but I do want to acknowledge my colleague, Gabe Oniator. He's the deputy project manager. We are in some of our consultants that hopefully you've heard from this year. So I know you have Alec and Stacy and Patrice and others. I want to thank them so much for their support on this project. And we'll keep moving forward. Okay. So I want to acknowledge here some of the community engagement that we've done in 2024. We did do community engagement last year as well, but since we've restarted this project and focused on implementable things that we can move forward more quickly with and end up with solid deliverables with this one. This is what we've done this year. So we've had many meetings with the ANC, our community advisory group. We held 2 meetings, so in August and October, and I want to highlight that especially. We go to our community advisory group before every public meeting that we hold to give them kind of a dry run of what we're proposing to speak to all of you about, and get that initial feedback so that for us, we can refine and make those edits and take that feedback before we come to the bigger community to make sure we're really dotting every I and crossing every T. So I want to thank them so much for the great feedback they've given us. And then in addition to our formal meetings, where we've checked in with the ANC, the community advisory group, and these larger public meetings in person and virtual, we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations in the community as well. And I want to highlight some of those here. You can see we've come and spoken to HABA, we've spoken to folks at Union Temple, Fairlawn Citizens Association, Fire and EMS. We've been on site and talked to some of the captains there, the Family Strengthening Collaborative, the PNC Bank, and we've sent lots and lots and lots of mailers, as you can see, and dropped signage and literature and all of the things, and really been out here talking to people and helping explain what we hope to do and taking the feedback to make sure what we plan to do to improve safety reflects what the community wants. Slide, please. All right, so I'm going to recap our in-person public workshop in September that we had at Ketchum Elementary School. We've had a lot of those one-on-one conversations since then, but we had some exercises at this public meeting that helped us refine our approach to some of the neighborhood safety improvements in the areas surrounding the MLK Marion Barry intersection, as well as the unified concept that we've been working on as well from the feedback that we've gained with this project along the way. So I'm going to touch on the recommendation summary. We have received lots of feedback. There are some bigger, higher level recommendations that maybe won't get carried forward in the immediate term with this project that we're going to hold on to, but these are really, this is the summary of the most tangible, important things that we've heard from people, and we're in the process of either having completed or working towards after finishing out with our final public meeting tonight, working on getting to the design and implementation phase in the near future. So in the complete, you can see, hopefully, that you guys have already driven through already. We've removed dual right turns that used to go from Marion Barry, or formerly Goodhope Road, towards the bridge in MLK. We heard you loud and clear that those were very difficult to navigate and did not feel safe. So those are no longer there, and along with some other more immediate term improvements at the intersection. This summer, we had traffic control officers during peak hours, peak commuting hours, helping direct people through the intersection, hopefully helping with education and repeating that pattern of good driver behavior. So hopefully that has had some lasting impact. And we have also now, with the school year, though many of our traffic control officers do have to pivot and focus to the intersections closest to school, we've also tried to have them in those shoulder hours where they're working just after school hours as well. And that's something that we've heard loud and clear has been very, very helpful. It's not a permanent solution to the safety issues, but it is one solution that helps along the way with some of the things we've heard. And so we're going to work to try to see if we can continue that at least out of those school hours, but we've heard you all loud and clear on that. One thing that's approved and installed and in process that hopefully you have seen is on the 11th Street Bridge coming over from Navy Yard, so south towards Anacostia, there is a speed enforcement camera now on the 11th Street Bridge. So one of the biggest safety issues that we have heard time and time again is speeding into the neighborhood coming across the bridge, coming off of 295, drives a lot of the safety issues at the intersection itself. So that camera is installed. It's currently testing. It will be getting to tickets soon, so please take heed. Start slowing down. Once it gets out of the testing phase, they will start issuing tickets, and really we will start seeing speed drops, which is the point of all of it. As it works, fewer tickets will be issued because folks will be slowing down and it's going to feel safer. So that's one thing we're really excited about. And what we're really going to focus on tonight are these other two buckets over here: neighborhood traffic safety, so historic Anacostia, Fairlawn, and then this unified vision for Marion Barry Avenue Southeast. And the point of why we added these and why we've really focused in on these two areas with this refocus of the project and finishing out is, yes, this project started about the safety at MLK Marion Barry at the intersection. However, through all of the community engagement we've done, from talking to people, what we've realized is you can't address the safety and the comfort issues at the intersection for all users, whether you're walking or driving, unless we're also taking a more comprehensive, integrated approach to how people are getting to and from that intersection. And so naturally, that's the neighborhoods immediately next to them, and Marion Barry Avenue as well, because it feeds through that intersection and really is the spine through this area. Next slide, please. Now, some of those updates, I've spoken through some of these, but I want to just touch on. There are other ideas we've heard, there are other recommendations we've come up with as part of this project, and I just want to be really clear. Though it may not be something we're recommending as part of this project for getting to that next design and implementation as directly attached to this project, we are passing on all feedback, all engagement to the right folks internally. So traffic cameras, we passed that on to automated traffic enforcement, and it got implemented. 11th Street Bridge, there's some other ideas we've heard about potentially reallocating space, tightening up intersections to be safer for pedestrians. There's a future bus priority project that we're going to make sure we pass on all of those specific items that we've heard as well. We're in really close coordination with the Anacostia Business Improvement District to work on how we can implement planters and integrate those into our safety plans so that while we're making these safety improvements, we can do our best to reduce the number of flex posts that we use in them and make them greener and safer, but also, hopefully more beautiful at the same time. And then on the right side, I'm not going to go through all of them. There's some really big forward-thinking ideas that we've heard that we want to acknowledge. We'll be passing these on to longer-term big projects like the Reconnecting Communities 295 project and making sure that the engagement and what we've heard from all of you in this process gets passed along and is not forgotten, and we'll get into there and make sure that they know the community is thinking about these things that outside of just this intersection. Next slide, please. Thank you. 13th and W. So initially, as part of this process for this year, as we've refocused, we had two what we called ASAP locations where we wanted to try to move forward a bit faster if we could at 13th and W, and one you'll see after this. Unfortunately, with the way that the weather and the construction queue worked out, we're not able to move them forward faster this year like we had hoped, but we are going to fully integrate them into the neighborhood plan. But with that, we had some extra, more focused engagement that I wanted to highlight here. So 13th and W, this is something from the get-go. I hear this on lots of other projects. This is a really important intersection that needs a stop sign. So with this neighborhood plan, we are going to implement and put in a stop sign on that leg coming over from MLK past Union Temple to make sure that this is an all-way stop intersection and feels safer. As part of that, what we're going to do is tighten it up, have a one single approach so folks can't zoom around you at the intersection when you're the one doing the proper stop. So we'll tighten those up to be a single approach. And what that is going to allow us to do is, because now that one-way street will have a single lane approach, it's going to allow us to restore full-time parking on both sides of W Street for that block. And that's something that Union Temple has expressed significant support for, and it's really important for their operations. And it's going to allow us to also reinforce the changes here and the safety changes here so that, we will have some curb extensions and some safety improvements and parked cars so that folks know this is a single lane approaching the intersection, and it will integrate into some of our recommendations you'll see after this. The next one, the 1300 block of Marion Barry, again, this will be implemented as part of our neighborhood plan, but was an idea that we heard from folks, challenges with this second block. So you'll see on the left, that's the first block next to like Capital One Cafe and the bid building up here. Currently, you can see it has the two lanes going towards MLK and 11th Street, a single lane going east towards Minnesota Avenue, and full-time parking on the south side. But then under existing conditions on the next block, so past D-City Smokehouse and the businesses on that block, it effectively looks and feels like two really wide lanes, and it's a bit challenging to know when you're headed towards the bridge to get to 295, hey, maybe I should start sorting into my two lanes already and getting ready for those turning movements. So what we want to do here is make the second block look like the first block and make it work with the rest of the corridor here. So what we'll do on that second block, we'll have the two lanes going west towards MLK and 11th Street, so folks can go ahead and start sorting into their left and through lane to either go left down MLK or across to the park, or to make that right turn over to 295 and the bridge. We'll have a single lane going eastbound towards Minnesota Avenue, which is consistent with the block before and after. And then we'll be able to restore full-time parking. So we would remove the rush hour restrictions on that south side where the majority of businesses are. So it won't necessarily be every foot of that block will be parking. We have to look out for things like driveways, alleys, et cetera. All of this, the underlying implication is we have to look at our standards and make sure we're really meeting those in the design phase. But we're really excited, and I've heard really positive feedback about this from the community. Marion Barry Avenue Unified Vision. So this is one thing we focused on and had a special exercise at our in-person public meeting with some polling. One thing we've heard along the way, right, the focus starting out with safety at the intersection, but we've always heard lots of feedback about Marion Barry Avenue as a corridor as we're talking to folks. And there's what we've realized along the way is there's never been this unified intentional approach to Marion Barry Avenue as a corridor to not just talk about safety issues, which we know are super important and we have to address, but also what do we want Marion Barry Avenue to look and feel like? And so we realized we needed to ask people that. And so what we did is we came up with an exercise, and we spoke with people in person, and we've talked about this one-on-one as well, is, well, what do you want Marion Barry Avenue to look like? Do you want to keep it the same? Would you like to have wider sidewalks, maybe add bicycle facilities, maybe add landscaping, more green space, vegetated medians? So we just asked people, what do you prefer? You can see the different dots. It looks a little evenly split, but between the polling and the in-person exercise, what we heard from folks was to prioritize adding landscaping and other green elements, as well as widen sidewalks along the length of Marion Barry. That doesn't preclude potentially like a shared use path or wider sidewalks that could be safe as well for, you know, folks on bikes or scooters. But the thing that we really heard from folks was wider sidewalks, green elements, and landscaping. Next slide, please. Now, the neighborhood safety part of this. These are our two focus study areas. So you've got the intersection there towards the beginning. That's where we started. That's the focus of this, which is addressing safety and challenges to the intersection. These are the two neighborhoods hugging them, right? That we have to address the safety issues through these to really get at addressing safety issues at the intersection on the corridor. So we looked through other projects, feedback we had already heard from folks last year, and kind of tried to narrow it down to what are the major considerations, what are the major challenges that we have to address and that we have to balance and make tough decisions with in order to improve, right? What we have now, leaving it the same is not an option because what we have now just isn't working. We've got folks speeding, people don't feel safe walking or even, you know, driving and otherwise through here. We have to do something. So those considerations are Metro bus service. We already have Metro bus service, obviously along the main corridors on MLK and Marion Barry in Minnesota, but also existing on W Street. With WMATA's region-wide Better Bus Network redesign, we're going to have next year, towards the end of summer, bus service not just on W Street, but also on V Street. So we know that's coming. Those plans are approved from WMATA. There's emergency services challenges in the neighborhood. So at 14th and V, just on the south side of the white oval in the center, we have the firehouse, and we heard from the captains there that they're having challenges responding to emergencies because they're getting stuck on the streets trying to get out. So we've got parking on both sides. We have two-lane direction traffic in each way, and quite frankly, just not enough space to accommodate all those things. And then the other one, ongoing traffic safety issues I allude to. So we have our traffic safety inputs where folks from the neighborhood can flag safety issues for them, and then we work on addressing them. We want to make sure we integrate and take all those existing challenges and feedback that we've heard from the general input process and make sure we address it with this project. And it leaves circulation and parking. Those are the two things that we realized if we want to address these competing considerations, we have to make a choice when it comes to circulation and parking. It really is an either or. We can preserve the circulation, so keep existing two-way streets two-way, keep existing one-way streets one-way, and reduce parking to address the safety issues with buses, with firehouse, with visibility issues as a pedestrian, or we can maximize and preserve parking by introducing some one-way streets that by removing that additional direction gives us space to implement safety improvements, address the fire emergency response concerns, the bus service, and maximizing parking, which folks have clearly indicated to us is extremely important in this area. Next slide, please. So this is where we ended up in those options. You'll see Fairlawn, it's not that it's an easier one, it's that it doesn't have, it's over off to the side, it doesn't have bus service through it, it doesn't have the firehouse there, so that one's a little bit more straightforward. We want to convert T Street to be one-way eastbound for the entire way through the neighborhood. There's a morning peak hour signage situation there now that quite frankly just doesn't work very well, so we want it to be consistent throughout the whole block. And then everywhere we can, we want to add curb extensions, so we want to tighten up the intersection so that they're safe to turn on to and from, they're visible for drivers and pedestrians, and clear to make those safe turning maneuvers. And then everywhere possible where they don't exist, we want to add either speed humps, tables, or cushions to make sure that folks, when they're driving through, are going the speed limit because they have to, because we've got those there. And then in Anacostia, which I'll show in a graphic form in a second, we've got these competing options that we talk to folks about, which is preserve the circulation or preserve the parking. And I want to be really clear across both of these options in Fairlawn and both options in Anacostia, safety is not an option, right? We are going to be adding curb extensions and speed humps, tables, or cushions throughout the neighborhoods so people can make safer turning maneuvers through clear and visible intersections and see each other safely navigating. And we're going to slow people down, right? People should not be speeding through this neighborhood. It's a residential area. They should be going the speed limit, which in a residential neighborhood is 20 miles per hour. If you're going faster than that, you're not operating safely. And so we want people to operate safely. And then also we've been working with Engine 15 Fire Station. We want to pilot a new traffic safety treatment to try to address some of their concerns and the safety concerns from the neighborhood at the same time. And I'll show you what that looks like. Next slide. Okay, so this is in Fairlawn. As you can see, circulation largely the same, but there is that block of T Street that has sort of a morning operation only that we want to make it full time so that you've got Ridge Place to the west, two-way direction on S Street, eastbound only, kind of just makes sense at a neighborhood-wide level. And then on the next slide, you'll see the two alternatives that we discussed with folks to get their feedback. So this is existing. Lighter red indicates existing two-way street, so you can go in both directions on that street. And then the darker red is where you're restricted to one single direction. The arrow is the direction that it's restricted towards. So 13th Street here, and as you know, is northbound only towards Marion Barry Avenue. Option 1, so this is the one where we would focus on wherever possible, preserve existing circulation. So keep the streets, the directions they go under existing conditions, the way they go. So you can see there are a few one-way changes in the southwest portion that are across both options that for safety reasons we think are vital and that need to be included in both. And that's because of that intersection at MLK and Pleasant Street and Mapleview by the Starbucks. It's a really unsafe intersection. I was driving through there the other day, and folks making that left out by Starbucks really can't see traffic coming, and it's just not safe. So what we want to do is flip the direction of Mapleview by the Starbucks, so it's coming into the neighborhood. That takes out one direction of conflict, right? So folks are just going in, and then we match it with the way out of the neighborhood. So with all of these decisions, we want to keep it making sense as a neighborhood. So if one's coming in, then we want to make sure we have that alternative out as well. Everywhere else, we're pitching to keep it the same. So you'll see though, 2 blocks of V Street, still on the first option. The first block of V Street, in order to keep all the circulation the same, we would at a minimum, we think, have to remove at least 2 full blocks just on one side of parking in order to give the firehouse a safe way out of the neighborhood. So this is what we started with, our most conservative approach to removing parking, which is at least one side of the block of no parking for 2 full blocks where they currently go out now. I will say from the conversations we've had with the firehouse, they would have really strong concerns also about W Street from 14th to 16th, that this is probably the best we could do. And we may, in this condition where we want to preserve circulation, we would probably need to remove more to safely address bus and fire emergency response issues. So very clearly, we heard from a lot of folks, they did not like removing parking. So we had a second option, which is change the circulation patterns, which gives us a little bit of extra space to work with, which allows us to preserve all of the parking as much as possible. We still have to make some minor tweaks for safety and visibility at intersections, but by and large, parking on both sides of the street everywhere we can and meet our standards. In order to do so, we have to make some one-way circulation changes. So you'll see here again, really hitting on that integrated approach that we've really been heard loud and clear, especially from the ANC and from others, make it make sense at a neighborhood level. That's the idea here. So U Street, we would flip the direction. So it would go into the neighborhood from MLK to 14th, and then you would have V Street from 16th Street towards MLK to get out of the neighborhood. W Street, it's the existing eastbound block already in front of Union Temple. So we would continue that and we'd have eastbound towards 16th Street for the full length from MLK. And then again, those safety improvements, but again, follows the same pattern where out of the neighborhood, into the neighborhood. So that, yes, we're restricting a specific direction on that block, but you have within a block a way to make that same movement. You just go a little bit out of the way to maximize the parking and still make it make sense and be safe. So what did we hear from folks? Well, when we pitched this to people, you could see that it was a little bit even in the DOT exercise, but when we've spoken with folks, when we did the polling, and when we talked to people, it became very, very clear that maybe people support them or the ideas of it equally, but in the opposite way, folks were much more concerned and against removing parking. What we have heard is circulation changes. I don't know if I 100% want that, but I know I do not want to reduce parking, and that is a significant challenge to my quality of life, and that is not an option, and I would much rather look at changing circulation to address those safety concerns and address my needs to get in and out of the neighborhood. So very loud and clear, preserve the parking. Next slide, please. Now, some of those safety toolbox, the safety things we want to implement, I just want to highlight some of those reasons. So the ones I highlighted where we're going to do this everywhere possible at the intersections to make them safe and visible and clear and easy to navigate. Curb extensions, this is what I mean. It can mean a couple different things depending on some of the different nuances of a specific intersection, right? So some of these we figure out in engineering design exactly the appropriate curb extension, right? Depending on drainage infrastructure, depending on the specific angles and the turns we need to accommodate, depending on the vehicle size. But by and large, what we do is we want to pull the parking back, and then we can also bump out the curbs so that we can increase the visibility for drivers and for pedestrians. And so this little video you can see to the side really gives a great example of why that's so important. It's such a minor thing, but it really makes a huge safety improvement. When the cars are parked right up on the crosswalk and a car's coming, the red spot, they cannot see the pedestrian. Depending on the car sizes, the pedestrian may not be able to see the oncoming vehicle. Once you pull those cars back, and then you can even like bump out the curb where you see the painted lines there, there's a much clearer vision for the driver and for the pedestrian to slow down, cross when it's safe, drive through when it's safe. And one thing that we've heard as well, if you're in a slightly larger vehicle, it also makes it easier to navigate through the intersection as a driver when folks are not parked right up on the crosswalk. Next one, please. Speed humps, tables, and cushions. I just want to highlight what I mean by that. So a speed hump, you all know, it's a little raised area, it slows you down. A speed table is slightly different, very similar, but it's basically extended out a little bit longer. We put those places typically where we know buses or fire trucks or larger vehicles navigate through, where it still slows people down, but it's a little bit easier for them to navigate. And then we have these speed cushions that we're hoping to pilot with this project, which really is not anywhere on public streets in the district as far as I know. We're really hoping to be on the cutting edge to pilot something with this project in Anacostia that can hopefully teach us some lessons for fire emergency, for DDOT, and figure out how we can balance those safety concerns from the fire department, but also from the neighborhood. And you'll see it's very similar to a speed hump, but it has grooves in the middle that make it easier for a large vehicle to get around, but a normal sized vehicle is still going to have to, go up and down over the bump and get slowed down. Slide. All right, this one I'm not going to go too much in. We got to keep crosswalks clear. We got to keep intersections clear. Again, to that visibility point, we can't have parking within 25 feet of a crosswalk and within 40 feet approaching a signalized intersection. I know sometimes that's challenging if maybe signage has been incorrect in the past, but these are standards. It's for safety. It's really essential to make sure that drivers and pedestrians can see each other so you can make those safe decisions when navigating conflict points like crosswalks. Next slide, please. All right, so again, hitting on some of the feedback we heard a lot of support for speed cushions. The first time we came to the community and to the community advisory group, actually, there were some concerns that we wouldn't be able to address the fire emergency response concerns while also addressing the speeding and safety concerns. And we received a lot of positive feedback that they appreciated sort of a potential solution that can try to balance both of those, but not leave out the traffic safety concerns. We did hear a lot of support to make where possible, curb extensions permanent, or to use planters more than flex posts as much as possible. We heard a lot of support for planters over flex post. We heard some specific recommendations for additional locations for speed cushions, curb extensions, and other safety improvements. And then just really clear feedback that, yes, this is a project and it's got its own little special community engagement process, but don't leave out these other ongoing safety concerns that we flagged through the TSIs we issued and spoken to as well. Like, please make sure this is comprehensive and addresses those speeding and safety concerns in the neighborhood. Next slide. All right, so it leads us to our draft final recommendations, which we want to, hopefully from the way I've spoken through the feedback, you can see the direction we're headed, but I want to show you just exactly what we're proposing. We've drafted some images that we think make it a bit clearer of the potential of what a unified vision could look like and what some of those traffic safety features could look like, so that we can close out this project, this engagement and planning phase of the project, and get to the design and implementation of it. The whole refocus of this project was studying is great, planning is great, let's get some action going and make these changes. And so that's what we're excited to finish up here and get towards next year. So next one, Marion Barry Avenue. Tying it all together, the point of this is to come up with a unified cross-section with attractive streetscaping that makes Marion Barry Avenue be what we know it is, which really is the main street through the neighborhood. It's the connecting line across all of this that ties everything together. So it should make the intersection at the beginning feel like a gateway entering the neighborhood. It should prioritize landscaping and green elements and widen sidewalk. And if it can't include a specific bike facility, there should still be safe alternatives to do so. So whether that is a wider sidewalk that maybe we can consider a shared use path, or whether it's alternatives through the neighborhoods, making sure that just because we didn't choose a specific type of facility that might be in between the curbs, that we are still considering that. Next slide. So what we did is we wanted to make sure that, speaking to that is easy. Talking about what wider sidewalks look, we wanted to come up with some sketches that we can put into our final deliverable. We will have a final report that we can pass on when hopefully there's a future infrastructure project, or when anybody does bigger work along Marion Barry Avenue, we can point them toward this and say, hey, we have talked to the community. This is what you need to be considering. This is what you need to be doing. Don't go through a whole replanning effort. We've done this. We know what the community is interested in turning this into long term. At least a good place to start with that. So this is facing west towards the park. So MLK would be behind you. This is the leg of Marion Barry that faces the park and the underpass. So we wanted to show what two options could look like. So this first option coming after this, you can see is what a cycle track or a dedicated bike facility could look like. So it still would maintain the 2 lanes of traffic through the underpass, but we would potentially have space for a dedicated bike facility to connect people to the park. You'll see this bubble. I do want to clearly call out, there are different groups that are looking at different options to re-envision and consider, how to make this underpass and connection to the park a safer, more vibrant connection. This doesn't preclude that. So you see this, and it could mean that maybe instead of a cycle track, a two-way two-way bike facility you see on the left, it could mean that actually we extend the curb and make it a much wider sidewalk that could be used like a shared use path. So please don't think this is the final version. We just want to give you the ability to see what the potential future could look like, re-envisioning this based on the feedback we've heard. Next slide, you can see, again, the one that we heard a lot more. Again, all of this has to be looked at according to our standards. These tree boxes might look a little bit different and be refined and make sure they match all our guidelines. This is what it could look like if we re-envision the space to have additional green space, maybe wider sidewalks, maybe more pervious area to help with stormwater issues. This is what it could look like. So we just want to acknowledge, like, these are the options we talked to people about. This is what we heard and is supportive, and this is what it could look like at that leg. We know when we get to design and engineering, there will be refinements, but we just know when a project comes through and is thinking about these big infrastructure improvements, we want them to start with what we know has already been vetted by the community. So I'm going to walk through a couple other segments where you can see what that could look like at certain segments. So next one, this clip, this picture would be like what it could look like roughly from MLK to Minnesota Avenue. So this is what it is like currently and will look like on that second block, like I alluded to earlier. What could it look like if we had a dedicated cycle track? You can see on the one after it. It would mean having to remove parking on that first block, which we acknowledge would have implications. That may not be feasible, but if we wanted to do so, this is how you would do it. That would be a conversation. That would be a conversation with the businesses, with the community. Is this what we want the block to look like? Are we willing to deal with those trade-offs in order to do so? It's a possibility. Now the other way, again, the wider sidewalks and the vegetation. What would it look like if we bumped it out a little bit? Alternatively, it could be actually getting our lanes up to a little bit closer to our standards. If you drive through this intersection now, you know the lanes are pretty tight, and they're that way because we're trying to maximize the capacity because it's a really busy intersection. So maybe widening the sidewalks. Again, this is, sorry, wrong label there, but wider sidewalks and tree boxes. You can see we'd be able to give ourselves a little bit more breathing room, maybe bump out the curbs a little bit, and have bigger sidewalks along these businesses. Next slide, you can see, so the next section, this is by Fort Circle Park. Again, the two versions that we talked about. We already have a safety project that's coming through and planning to be implemented on the corridor from Minnesota Avenue to Alabama Avenue. That is going to clearly put lines on this, that it is one lane in each direction with parking on both sides. So that is coming with or without this envisioned project. So we took that as the beginning of, we have all this excess space, right? This is way too wide for one lane of travel in each direction, which is what this is supposed to be. So what could it look like? First alternative, we could have a cycle track. Again, the two-way cycle track on that left side. We would still keep one side of parking. There's not a ton of parking demand on this specific stretch, actually, because of the park. It's just the park. There's not businesses or houses here for the most part, and a lane of travel in both directions, just like there are in existing conditions and will be in the future. But we have space so that folks can bike safely, can scoot safely, but can be on the sidewalk as well and have that option. And again, the second one would be, well, what if we did wider sidewalks and vegetation? What if we made Marion Barry Avenue feel more like a parkway and it just felt greener? That's an option. So we would, again, you still can see a lane of parking. You've still got a lane of travel in each direction, but maybe instead of a cycle track, we envision using that excess space for some trees, and maybe you could have wider tree boxes, or maybe actually, because we're not doing a cycle track, maybe a 6-foot sidewalk turns into a 10 or 12-foot shared use path that's safe for walking and biking and all of the different options we have just on the other side of the curb instead. So just being creative with the space that we have and thinking about the different ways we can use it. And then the next one, again, another stretch past Fort Circle Park. So again, facing towards, you can see towards downtown. Again, those two versions here, just another sketch to kind of see what it could look like. So first the cycle track. And then again, the second one, the medians. And again, it could also be looking like bumping the sidewalks out and having bigger tree box and sidewalks instead of the median. It's one alternative that folks told us they were interested in seeing and really enjoyed. And just making sure that we know that just because Marion Barry Avenue is the way it is currently, which needs the safety improvements, which are coming, we can think of the long-term solutions and think how we want it to look and have a similar aesthetic along the entire corridor. And so this is what we heard, and we hope this is helpful to visualize that process in the future. And I do see, just on that, I say vision, I say unified vision for a reason on Marion Barry Avenue. With this project specifically, that type of work is not going to get implemented specifically from the project. The neighborhood plans, the more immediate term stuff, those immediate term safety improvements, that's what we're focused on getting implemented, hopefully, and I'll touch on the timeline at the end. The vision is just that. When future investment comes in Marion Barry Avenue, right, we expect to focus like in the future when a larger infrastructure project comes, this is the vision, right? So this is what we've heard. We're not quite to the point yet where we have a specific project we 100% know is coming to implement it, but when it gets there, we want to be ready for it so that we can tell them exactly what the community wants, building on the engagement they'd obviously do then. Again, talking to here, right, we had some alternatives. We just wanted to make sure we address that, if the cycle track's not chosen, if a bike facility between the streets is not the right approach, we want to make sure there's alternatives, right? So making these neighborhood improvements through Fairlawn, adding traffic calming like speed humps, like adding speed tables, slows neighborhood streets down to be safe and be comfortable to bike on. So we just wanted to call that out, where maybe we don't have a cycle track in the near term on that stretch, west of the library, for instance. Implementing these neighborhood safety improvements on V Street, on W Street in the community through the residential part of the neighborhood gives you a safe alternative to bike and to connect to Marion Barry Avenue, where we're closer to the park, we maybe would have more space for a shared use path and other options. So we just want to be clear, these are going to include trade-offs long-term to make these decisions, and we want to make sure that we're considering all those regardless of the approach that we take. So again, an S street that is calm, traffic calmed, and safe to drive slowly down, safe to bike slowly down, could still get you along the corridor in the future and be an alternative. Next slide, please. All right, so Summarizing what I talked about earlier, what we heard loud and clear in the neighborhood portions of this: preserve on-street parking by making circulation changes. It was very clear to us from the feedback we've heard from the community advisory group, from the one-on-one conversations, that is the preferred approach. It's very, very clear. Making sure we address all existing traffic safety inputs and existing safety concerns, right? Which was kind of what we started with, actually. Move forward with that speed cushion. We heard great support from the fire department. They're really excited about hopefully moving forward with those speed cushions. And we actually, which you'll see in a little bit, made some adjustments in order to better match their operations on how they get out of the neighborhood and respond to emergencies. And again, just be really clear that when we get from this concept, right, we're choosing our final concept, our final vision. As we get through final design and engineering and work our way through where we're actually down to the foot, every foot and inch, making sure that we do still check in with the community and make sure that we leave ourselves some space to make those refinements based on traffic analysis, based on that continued community feedback and conversation with stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? This is the recommendation. Hopefully it was clear from the way I was talking about the feedback. It's the one that maximizes circulation changes in order to maximize parking. So what it would look like is flipping the direction of U Street, making V Street one way to the west, continuing W Street to the east, and making the safety improvements through the southwest part of the neighborhood. So we wanted to give a little bit of a vision of the potential ways that that could look. Again, I want to be very clear. We want to defer to our engineers and our safety experts as we get to engineering design, and we're looking at every inch and foot between the curves and making the decisions on the exact cross section, the exact layout based on what is going to give us the most safety improvements. But we wanted to give you a little bit of a vision of what that could look like, where we're going to start from basically to take this to an actual implementable engineering design plan. Next slide, please. So you'll see some existing, right? So this is if you cut the street down the middle, what I'm looking at. So in this one, this would be, for instance, V and W Street under existing conditions. They've got really tight parking lanes. They're not striped under existing conditions, right? But they're pretty tight. And then we've got driving lanes that are don't meet our standards, right? Driving lanes really need to be wider than this, particularly when we've got fire trucks and buses coming them through. So hopefully none of you have been the victim of a side mirror getting scratched or getting hit, but like, this is why we've had this challenge, is there's just not enough space for all of this. Next slide. And again, these were some of visualizing what those alternatives were. So this is what it would look like if we had gone with the option one and recommended that. We'd have to eliminate an entire side of parking, but it gets us up to the lane widths that we want to safely accommodate buses and larger vehicles and having parking. So that's what that could have looked like, but it would have eliminated an entire side of parking. And then the one-way option, again, what could that look like? And again, what are we starting with when we take this recommended concept through the engineering design process, right? When we'll go through and review and revise and get to the final design plans. It could look like a slightly wider lane with pavement markings and sharrows that is like a slow neighborhood bikeway kind of street where it is mixed traffic, it's safe, but because it's more of a neighborhood feel, it's safe to drive and to bike on together because it is a neighborhood slow local street. And we'd have parking lanes of closer to like the appropriate widths we would prefer them. 8 feet is the ideal for parking most of the time. 9 feet is acceptable, but it also helps facilitate, you know, if you've got some curbside demand issues, like maybe at Union Temple or schools and things like that. Next slide. Or alternatively, this could be an option where we can have the parking on both sides, but we may be able to squeeze in a contraflow bike lane. So again, this is another potential option where we still maximize and keep parking on both sides, have the lane of traffic to get where you need to go that is safe and effective for buses and for fire emergency responses, but we use some of that excess space to give people the option to bike or scoot or use whatever multimodal device they want to go on opposite directions on W Street. So while cars would be restricted to one way on W, V, and U, potentially, again, depending on that final curb-to-curb width on every block, we may be able to squeeze in room so that bikes can actually go both directions. So a bike here could still be in the drive lane, or it could go the opposite directions in the bike lane. Again, this is what we're going to start with. These are potential options that work with those one-way changes, but we're going to lead with safety and ultimately go with the design that we think is best appropriate to balance those different concerns that we talked about. Happy to answer some questions if you do have some confusion and can talk you through it. And again, when I talk through What exactly does could a curb extension look like? We wanted to give 13th and W an example. So what could a curb extension look like that minimizes flex posts, but still is safe to navigate? Well, it would look like planters and pavement markings. So we put a sketch here as well so you can envision what that would look like. Right, so this gives us that safe visibility that we need. So no cars are parked within closer than 25 feet from crosswalks. It's got where you can see the pavement marking here is to reflect the turning radius that normal vehicles need, but then we actually place the planters just a little bit further back, one, to keep people from parking there so it's clear and visible, but we can actually check to make sure the planters match where a fire truck, for instance, needs to make a turn. So it's kind of that in between where we can minimize the flex posts, which we hear loud and clear folks don't love, but make sure we get those safety improvements here. And so it's kind of splitting the difference and trying to balance those concerns here. And to the left, you can see what that's going to do on the block by Union Temple in this neighborhood plan is restore full-time parking and give them the ability to do what they need as well. So I just want to highlight that there. And one asterisk here, I want to say that if you remember to an earlier slide, we're working in close coordination with the bid on many of these things in terms of like maintaining planters. That's one challenge that we're going to have to keep working through as we get into the actual engineering design plans and closer to implementation is we have to work with the community group to maintain these planters, right? So whether it's the bid, whether it is a historic Anacostia Block Association, we have to work with another group to maintenance. So we will have to establish maintenance agreements in order to keep these maintained. So I want to address that is that planters are not traditionally something that DDOT maintains on their own. They're not a typical treatment. They're something we're really trying to encourage and get in that direction based on the feedback, but we have to have that community buy-in. So we are going to have to keep following up with our community partners and make sure that we can have people take good care of these and keep them where they are. And quite frankly, I think a community-led approach probably ends with the best results as well in terms of making these attractive and beautiful, right? You could have arts in the right-of-way installations and road murals potentially too that any group could apply for and consider in some of these curb extensions as well. Next slide, please. I do just want to touch on, just because we had challenging alternatives that we had to look through in Anacostia, I just want to specifically highlight and make sure we are acknowledging where those changes would be in Fairlawn. So you can see in blue here, basically anywhere where there are not already speed humps, right, which there are quite a few actually in Fairlawn, we want to just basically finish out the network wherever possible. Again, we'll have to check our guidelines to make sure we can get the placement just right and be the proper distances from existing speed humps and intersections. We just want to fill in those spaces everywhere we can so that you have to go the speed limit and you have to drive safely when you come through the neighborhood. It's not a choice. People need to be safe and go the speed limit. So just want to call that out here. Where it's blue, that's where we would be looking at implementing speed humps wherever possible. And you can see again closer in here a little bit better what tightened intersections and where those curb extensions could go. So where feasible, we would love to do like concrete and more permanent curb extensions. Maybe where there's more challenges in the short term to get it done in a timely fashion, it could look more like the planter example I showed. Next slide, please. And then this is a lot to look at. You'll have this for reference, but we want to really highlight here where we want to end up in the actual traffic safety calming improvements, the traffic calming improvements. And so this is like the final vision. So this is a mix of existing. So some of these boxes you'll see like the light blue or speed humps, speed cushions are that piloted one with the grooves, speed tables are the slightly extended speed humps, raised crosswalks, just what it sounds like. This is where we ended up in the final based on the feedback, right? So we've made some adjustments where you can see the yellow boxes coming out from 14th Street in the two directions, coming out away from 14th Street. We want to pilot those speed cushions in the primary directions that the firehouse needs to get out of the neighborhood. So when they're responding to an emergency, by and large, their primary route is V Street to the west, or it is W Street to the east to try to get to 16th Street to go towards Congress Heights. Everywhere else, wherever feasible, we want to have speed humps or speed tables. So the green ones you can see where there's the bus service where it's going to be, we'll have those, more stretched out speed humps, the speed tables, so that they're still slowed down, but they're a little bit easier to navigate, but they're on the inbound routes for the fire trucks where they're coming back. So it's not quite as, an emergency to get out. Maintain the raised crosswalks where we already have them, the dark green ones, they're already there under existing conditions, and get the speed humps anywhere we don't have them and where they can meet our engineering design guidelines. get the speed humps everywhere we can. So again, you have to go the speed limit and operate safely in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So timeline and next steps, and when we get to any questions, we can go through the slide deck and go back to some of these. We will get to questions in the chat, but timeline and next steps. So next slide, please. Where are we at? So, seasonal timeline's a little fuzzy, but we're sort of right at this winter 2024, 2025 part where we're finalizing the vision, we're finalizing these neighborhood plans, and we're working towards the engineering design plans. So what we're doing is effectively closing out the official community engagement process here, which is this is our final public meeting, and this is where we're getting the implementable design plans after this based on this recommended concept. So next slide, you can actually see the meetings we've had. So in bolded, we're at this virtual public meeting. This is the final big public meeting as part of this project. We're working towards closeout. And by closeout, I mean the community engagement where we have dedicated public meetings is done after this, but we work on our design plans and getting to the implementable version of the concept, and we check in at major design milestones. So, as we get to the actual, like I said, every foot and inch kind of design, we come and check in with the ANC. We come and talk to folks if they want us to come to a meeting and give them an update, we can do so. I know HABA has regular meetings, Fairlawn Citizens Association has meetings. We're happy to stop by, give you a 5 to 10 minute update about what the status is if you have questions when we're at those major design milestones. Just because this project is closing out doesn't mean that continued engagement is over. Next slide, please. I'll leave it here. We are going to go through the questions. We will have the chance. We've got, I think, definitely, I can go on for a while, but we've got plenty of time for questions as well. I want to highlight here's the project website. Here's where we've got our interactive maps that we've had posted for a while, where some of you have left comments. Thank you so much. And then QR codes that you can use if that's easier to get to them. And again, like I said, just because the project is in sort of the closeout phase, that engagement's not over. I'm also the Ward 7 and 8 planner in the neighborhood planning branch at DDOT. So this is not the last you'll hear from me and with the other hats that I wear. And please reach out with any questions if you have them. We always want that engagement and feedback. So I think with that, I'm passing it back to either Stacy or Patrice to start helping go through some of these questions and make sure we've addressed every concern and question.
Yes, thank you, Preston. Okay, so we'll get started going through the chat. I didn't see any hand raises during the question, so we'll go through chat until someone raises their hand and in the order that we received everything. So the first question we have is the 1200, or actually it's a comment, the 1200 block of V Street residents are surprised that DDOT sought WMATA's approval on the bus route prior to responding to our first proposal.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, maybe the way I communicated was confusing. WMATA does the bus network redesign, did the network redesign. WMATA who led that project and did that. So when I meant it was approved, WMATA approved it because they're the ones that approved that. So I don't know the exact workings of their governance structure. It's not my area of expertise, but WMATA did the network redesign and the community engagement with that. Our acknowledgement is it is approved based on the process that they held, and we know those bus reroutes are coming. So we have to work and address the safety issues and the routing and make space for them because they are coming by the end of the summer. So, but that was not actually a DDOT project.
Okay, thank you, Preston. The next series of things are comments and they are letting us know that they like the design, and this was about slide 35. It's kind of when you got to 35, 36, 7, 8 through like 40 and 41. So I'll just read through some of these. One says, wow. One says, thank you for including the illegal barbed wire in the rendering, laughing out loud. The next one says, that's a beautiful approach to the park, love it. The next one is, this is a beautiful, exciting, inviting rendering. The next says, wow, I love it. More bike lanes in Ward 8, please. The next one says, really like the first one. And then it says, question for later on, has your planning included the possible Shepherd Branch Trail development?
Yes, absolutely. So that specific leg, so west of MLK, on our interactive map online, you'll actually see again, that is a vision, so that it's not that it's necessary. We know that there's for sure an infrastructure project that's going to make some of those adjustments yet. You'll actually see there's 2 proposed raised crosswalks on either side of the underpass. And because that's where we're envisioning, again, one day, I unfortunately don't have an answer on when that day will come. We anticipate the Shepherd Branch Trail will happen. And so we're envisioning a raised crossing just short of the underpass for something like that. On the other side, on the river side, where the 11th Street Bridge Park might come in the future, that'd be the way to, again, raise crosswalk over to get to that either shared use path, wide sidewalk, or potential cycle track on the left side in that picture, if you will. So absolutely, that is definitely on our radar.
Thanks, Preston. And an attendee asked, really like both options. Can we have trees and bike lanes?
You know, maybe, yes. I mean, existing trees for sure. We're going to preserve, we would always preserve every tree where possible. But unfortunately, there are tough decisions where we have to choose one or the other in spots. So our urban forestry division has minimums when it comes to like the medians or the tree boxes, where we have to have certain minimums to make sure that we have healthy trees that will actually survive and not just be twigs for a couple of years. So where we can, absolutely, we want to do so. It could mean that maybe a shared use path is a good alternative to get to both, where it may be like a bike lane isn't always the answer for a safe bike facility. I just want to say that it is sometimes in a lot of places, but a shared use path, which is kind of like a, you know, it's a really wide sidewalk with maybe some different material treatments. That is a safe place to bike, and that is a great alternative. So that is sometimes where we can look at a different type of facility that's not a bike lane, but it is a safe place to bike.
Okay, thanks, Preston. And C raised a hand, and we want to unmute that attendee so that we think it's in reference to your answer. Can you unmute C, please? Patrice? And let us know when she's unmuted. He or she, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can check. Okay, C, we hear you. C, you're unmuted. Did you have a follow-up question? Okay, we will come back and try that again. Let's continue on with the chat in the meantime.
She said her follow-up is in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Both are transformative improvements to the passageway from the river to Anacostia. So that's actually a comment. Oh, wow, the dream. These are referring to those same slides we mentioned before. Double wow, I love this. This would be amazing. It's so exciting to see how all modes of transportation can be included through improved design. Yes, both options are way better than the current layout. Looks wonderful, but taking parking away is not good for Marion Barry Avenue. Any comment there, Preston, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge that was part of the exercise when we asked folks was on the slide where we had the dots about like, do you want wider sidewalks? Do you want trees? Do you want things like that? Would you be willing to do it even if it meant losing parking, or only if there was able to be some supplemental parking, whether it's like a nearby development coming in or something like that? So by and large, I will say a lot of the feedback we heard was most folks were willing to make that compromise and select, you know, in the right locations for those improvements, but it's something we acknowledge like could potentially be a trade-off, right? So maybe it's that western block, like where most of the businesses are. Maybe folks aren't ready to make that trade-off, or maybe not ever. Maybe we need the parking, but it could be like the park side, for instance, like where it's effectively green space on both sides for a pretty long stretch. Honestly, I don't think that there is parking demand to keep those full of cars a lot of the time, where it actually could be a safety concern to leave an open lane like that. So we want to balance it, right? Loud and clear, hear you, but we want to push a little bit where it makes sense, where sometimes removing the parking can be a safety improvement, because if it's underutilized, people will cut around and not use it. So absolutely heard, and that's something we'll think about in the future about where does that make sense.
Okay, and on that same note, we have a attendee who says, I would love for us to remove parking on Marion Barry Avenue. To show that side of it as well. We will also take a pause and Tina has a question, has a hand raised. If you could unmute Tina, please.
I've unmuted her. She can come off mute now.
For this meeting and everything. So I'm a 12th and U Street resident. So I just don't understand why traffic is being put in the opposite direction, and there are implications to people coming across the 11th Street Bridge. Like, I think traffic is going to be crazy. Like, that gives people one block to get past that really crazy intersection, and then people will be stopped. Like, are you envisioning a traffic light there so people can turn left onto you? So I have lots of questions, but that's like, I think it's going to cause a pretty there are going to be like radiating factors, but I also just don't understand the point of it. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with that? And I think the feedback, I heard you guys say you had feedback, and I don't know who you were listening to for this particular part. Like, so many other great things about your presentation, but obviously I feel closest about this. And who were you listening to for this work?
Yeah, so I went to the signal part of that. So one, I just want to say, because I wasn't sure from response, we're not changing any directions on actual Marion Barry Avenue or MLK. There is, from earlier analyses, we would be looking at least at V Street for sure, whether a signal would be appropriate. Part of the traffic analysis that would come is there's certain like federal guidelines and warrants we have to meet to put in a signal. So it's something we could look at for U Street, but there's federal guidelines that we had to follow in relation to that. So that's one thing I'd say we have to follow those guidelines. And if by those standards a signal is not warranted, we have those limitations. So I do just want to acknowledge that. In terms of the point of that, of like the alternating one-way pairs and specifically U Street, is that in terms of the traffic analysis, right, we've had some preliminary alternatives before this. We'll have some finalized processes, part of that comes with the design phase. For the traffic flows to work essentially, right, so that we're not overloading W Street, for instance, right? Primarily people will use W Street. It is a signalized intersection. It is a compared to U Street, more major route, but having that alternative for, when it's really backed up for a car here and there to use U Street, it's necessary for traffic circulation, we think, right? We will have traffic analysis that comes with that. If the traffic analysis potentially were to show that we don't need that to happen, we would come with that update and let you know, right? Like, if we didn't need to make that change, it's something we'd be open to considering, but we have to make the safety improvements and make sure that we're facilitating the traffic as well. So I want to say, like, we can follow up on that. As far as the who, I don't necessarily want to like drop names of specific people. Like, we've heard some reservations. I understand the challenges of, like, you may have to circulate in a different way to get onto U Street. Like, you may have to go down to W Street and circulate around and make a couple right turns. That may add a minute or two to your commute time. I acknowledge that. We did speak with a couple businesses right around U Street. Like I said, we spoke to PNC Bank. We spoke to the Family Strength Plan Collaborative, just to make sure that had been a flag from a resident of they were concerned that those businesses would be have issues or challenges with this. They were supportive and didn't have any issues. So I hear you. I just acknowledge that there's a balance of concerns we have to take here, and we think this is the best approach from what we've heard by and large.
All right, thank you for that, Preston. So I'll read a series of questions. Did you consult with the Senior Center House at 1667 Marion Barry?
I myself have not had a one-on-one conversation, but I'm happy to flag that. And again, like I said, there's still be continued conversations. We can flag that and see if they'd be interested in having one of those one-off meetings to make sure that they know what we're planning on.
All right, and will any plans change the important safety improvements there in the uncontrolled sidewalk?
I'm not sure what slide it's referring to. So can you just read that one more time so I can think about it in the context of any intersection?
Sure, and we can follow up as well. Will any plans change the important safety improvements there in the uncontrolled sidewalk? It's now a traffic island.
Yeah, I think The comment's referring to the 1600 block of Marion Barry Avenue where the senior center is.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So that's like further down, like east of Minnesota, right?
Correct.
Okay, so not part of this project, but yes. So there is also a nearby project. I don't have my map that's showing other projects going on, but there's also a Marion Barry Avenue corridor safety project that is looking at Minnesota Avenue, Marion Barry Avenue, excuse me, from Minnesota Avenue all the way to Alabama Avenue. So any intersection from Minnesota Avenue to Alabama Avenue has more like immediate term safety improvements coming within the next year or two. That does include things like crossing treatments. I know, for instance, that they're looking to put a signal at 15th and Marion Barry Avenue right by Ketchum Elementary School. So I think the answer is probably, but I don't want to speak for them. Hopefully we can get that in the chat and follow up with you to direct you to that website that may be able to address your specific concern.
All right, thank you, Preston. The next question in the series is any plans for PBLs? The Columbia Road PBL project has created serious pedestrian dangers, food delivery mopeds and e-bikes racing down the PBL without looking for pedestrians. And finally, hope you will include education on the line of sight and daylighting. Many in Adams Morgan just don't understand the flexi posts and how they improve the intersection. So those two questions.
Right. So directly tied to this project, right, the things that we're moving forward to get closer to implementation, hopefully within like the next year. So next year, the next year's construction season is the intent in the neighborhood. So the historic Anacostia, the Fairlawn, and that one single block of Marion Barry Avenue. No, there will not be any protected bike lanes. There's the potential for those contraflow bike lanes with just paint. I can follow up and show an example of where that is, but other than the visioning we talked about, which is that we've heard from people they might be interested in it, not in the immediate future as part of this project, no.
Okay, the next question or statement is a cycle track on this part of the road is such a good idea, wouldn't take away any meaningful parking and would give folks other options for getting around the community. And next around that same slide is, I love this one. And these sketches are so helpful. Thank you for including them in your presentation. Wow, what is the timeline on the changes? I'm ready to see these improvements.
Yeah, just to reiterate, our goal is next year's construction season. So like I said, this is the closeout, and I am immediately moving in towards working with our implementers and getting this towards design plans that can get implemented. So the answer is hopefully by this time next year and much sooner, those more immediate term safety improvements will be coming to historic Anacostia and Fairlawn. Again, we'll check in with updates once we get some more definitive answers.
The next question is the city's vision to reduce roadways, driving surfaces, and to add that to disincentivize driving? Sorry.
I don't want to speak for like the entire agency. I just want to focus on this project since that's what I'm overseeing and managing. For this one, we're focused on safety for all users. So for instance, like narrowing travel lanes, narrowing the intersections and making them a little bit tighter so people have to drive more slowly and safely through them. Yes, that is a goal to improve safety with this project, but we want it to be for all users. So I can only speak to this one, but the goal of this project is to make it safe to use whatever mode of transportation you choose to use. So for me, if you want to drive through historic Anacostia, many people do and need to, you just need to do it safely. So that's all I can say to that one.
Okay, and I think the vision, another attendee made the note, I think the vision is to give people more, better, and safer options to move around the ward and the district. Another question we have is, what is the timing on the circulation changes in historic Anacostia?
Yeah, same answer again. We're targeting construction season for 2025. And if we have any updates or changes, we'll check in with ANC or other stakeholders if that does change or get updated.
Okay, next question, and to follow up on a previous question, will the curb extensions be installed at the same time as the circulation changes?
Yes, that's the plan. So again, when we have updates with the design plans, but yeah, those are a necessary part. And in my vision, absolutely, that is just a part of the same pavement marking changes. So yes.
Thank you, Preston. How will residents of U Street turn safely on to the street from MLK, and how will traffic not get backed up from Marion Barry?
Yeah, so again, I do want to reiterate, like we are working through traffic analysis and we'll make sure that it meets our standards for like what we call the levels of service that are appropriate through intersection. So it is something we are looking at analysis for that. I just want to be straightforward. Like, it may mean you need to circulate around the next block to do so, and I acknowledge that. It may mean that you need to go down a block and make a turn at W Street and then circulate up and make another right turn or two. So, or it might mean you make a left to Marion Barry Avenue, come in on 14th Street, and then again, like take fee and circulate up. Like we acknowledge that this is going to be, could potentially be perceived as slightly more inconvenient for some folks in the peak hours. When traffic's not so busy, I think you'd be able to make a left turn from there potentially. Again, I don't know the exact pavement markings. I don't want to confirm that 100% because we don't have design plans, but I acknowledge that as a challenge. Again, we think this is the best path forward for traffic and for safety.
All right, and we have a comment that says really confused about what this slide is showing. We think it's referencing slide 53 or 54, but we'll unmute Tina so that she can provide some clarity on that. Patrice, can you unmute her?
1 second. Tina?
Hi, this is Ben. Actually, this is Tina's husband. We're just looking at the same presentation. Yeah. Could I just elaborate on? So we live on the 1200 block of U Street, and she's the one raising the questions about the left turn. Could you pull up that slide? Like, if in rush hour, it's extremely difficult to make that left turn, and you'll see that if we go to W Street, we still can't get home from 11th for coming down the 11th Street Bridge. So if we can't make a left turn on U Street, we're kind of screwed in this plan. I guess we could take a left on Marion Barry, then take a right on 14th, and then take a right on W, then take a right on MLK, and then take another right onto U Street, or something like that. But it's very convoluted for this little corner of the traffic pattern.
Understood. I don't want to, sorry, I didn't forgot the specific name. We can follow up, and as we're working through that traffic analysis, we will follow up. Again, yes, that may be potentially the alternative routing you need to take in that instance, or down to W Street, come up 13th to V and make another right coming out. I'm okay. Yes, I do acknowledge that is a potential downside for that one specific block. Again, we really do think the value here of balancing the traffic safety improvements.
I have to add to, it's also the V Street residents who need to access the alley that is connected to U Street. So it's not just the U Street 1200 U Street residents that are affected. It's also the 1200 block of V Street.
Understood.
As well as the businesses, busboys and poets and so forth.
Yep, and we did speak directly with folks at PNC Bank and the Family Strengthening Collaborative, and we reached out to Busboys and are happy to have a conversation. They didn't have those concerns, I will just say. They were supportive of this, but we're happy to keep having these conversations. Like, we know everyone is not of the same mind 100%. So what we heard loud and clear mostly from folks is that they much prefer making these alternative like circulation changes compared to removing on-street parking. When we're going through the traffic analysis, we will look at that and take that into account. And if we're able to, we can consider that. But again, we have those metrics that we have to look at to make sure we balance the safety and the traffic flow as well.
Okay, well, I hope you look into that because it will cause a mess right there. So yeah, please take a closer look at 1200 block of U Street, 1200 block of V Street residents.
Will do.
And Ben and Tina, before you, I'm sorry, Preston, you can go ahead. I just don't want to mute them. I want to make sure we answer their other question as well. Preston, but go ahead and I'll follow up.
Oh, I just said will do.
Oh, okay. Ben and Tina, does that answer your question about the slide that you were confused about? Is this one and the same slide?
Yeah, I think it was the same issue. That traffic flow just does not work for this particular situation, this particular block. I think in general the plan is really good, but just like looking at this little section, it does not work for our area.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. All right, we will continue on in the questions. Paul said, I wish I could volunteer to help build the curb extensions. They seem like such an effective idea to prevent reckless high-speed driving and keep people safe in Ward 8. We have a comment that this is beautiful. All right, will there be a concerted effort by DDOT to maintain the planters' greenery?
So I think I answered that question, and it would be, we would need to establish maintenance agreements with like the business improvement district, maybe a civic association. So that's something that as we're working through the design and engineering process, we'll also be working on establishing that. So it would not be DDOT maintaining the planters. It would need to be some sort of community entity. Again, we're in very close coordination with the bid. I talk to their executive director at least once a month. So that's something we'll be working on to make sure we establish exactly who that would be.
Thank you. And thank you for hearing the community on how the flex post looks so cheap and unfortunate. It's a comment. The next one is, good evening. First, I appreciate this information. Great ideas have been shared. Are there posts or some type of cushions in front of Capital One at the intersection of Marion Barry Avenue and Martin Luther King Avenue? I asked because there was a really bad accident into one of the prior buildings where Capital One is located. If there are no posts or safety division, can some be placed there? I am very concerned about this.
So if by post you mean like very rigid bollards, no. If by post you mean the flex post, yes. I was just out there on Monday for a community walk, and there are some plastic flex posts in that no parking area in front of Capital One Cafe to reinforce the space for turning, so that people coming off MLK and the 11th Street Bridge to make that turn onto Marion Barry have the safe space to do so, and that nobody's blocking the visibility or the space to do so. So hopefully that answers that. Noted on the safety concerns, again, we're looking at the potential for considering things like planters there. It's something we're speaking with the bid about on, like, where are those locations where maybe the bid might initiate putting in some planters there to kind of reinforce those areas where we don't want people to park for safety issues and for that visibility.
All right, thanks, Preston. I know you mentioned working with other partners, but we do have a question. What about the clean team to maintain the planters?
Yeah, I think maybe yes. I believe clean team is the same as the bid. So yes, probably and potentially, but we are also open to talking to other partners. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it could mean like yes and for all of those. It could be the bid, could be the clean team, could be a church through an agreement with the bid. Like we're open all to any community members that are interested in helping work with us to make this happen.
Okay. And just a note, if planter maintenance agreement is not established, what's the plan? But I know you've kind of gone through that thoroughly. Any additional comments? Okay.
We will be figuring out. We will be establishing a maintenance agreement to get the planters in.
And please do talk specifically about U Street. I know you've gone into that as well, but I just want to make sure that there's nothing additional. I am not remembering or understanding the goal or the rationale behind these changes. Is that fully addressed? Anything to add?
I think it is for now. I think we, maybe still have some disagreement there, and I recognize that. I can follow up. I think it was maybe Ben and Tina. I just want to make sure I understand. I can follow up and have those conversations. The genesis of it, though, is like to make sure that we don't have too bad of backups on southbound MLK, is my understanding, right? So that's the understanding. We have the analysis coming to make sure that we're adequately addressing it, but that is the genesis, is that actually does help with traffic flow, or that is what we're looking to confirm. So that is the intent behind that flip in the direction on U Street.
Okay, and just another note regarding the planters and maybe another possible partner. We could ask Union Baptist to maintain the planters, considering the parking that is being added at their request. The next statement, I don't understand Union Baptist / Temple upset about parking when each of them have a parking lot. Just a comment. Next, do you have any traffic calming measure for U and V past 16th Street? Speeding is abhorrent between 16th and Findle on U.
No, not as part of this project. Our project limit stopped at 16th Street for this one. But I hear you, and I think hopefully, I guess I'll keep responding to the chat at one point. We do have, I alluded to that traffic safety input program where you can send those types of requests, where I know sometimes that is how they can get implemented at times. So it wouldn't be as part of this project, but we could have somebody follow up and make sure you're able to put that request in so that it gets added to the queue, so they can take a look at what might potentially be considered there in the future.
Okay, and so we have someone that says, thanks for always keeping safety at the core of your plans. They also mentioned this is a fantastic presentation, Preston. Next question is, did DDOT give WMATA the route recommendation?
Say that one more time.
Did DDOT give WMATA the route recommendation?
I could say I don't know the answer to that in terms of how the specific bus route. Again, that's with the Better Bus, and just I'm over this project, so unfortunately I don't know the answer. I know that it is approved and it's coming down W and V Street, so that's what we want to work with, is what we understand is coming.
And Preston, assuming as a follow-up to that, you don't know where the bus stops will be placed on V Street. That's the next question.
I personally, I know I've had conversations about it. I think they are working through it. So unless it's posted on the Better Bus website, I don't know if they have the exact one, but I believe there will be at least one bus stop coming to V Street. I don't know if they've finalized that. So I think they're working on, we know the bus route is coming down V Street. I think they're working on having at least one, is my understanding, but I don't know for sure at this point.
Okay, and there's a request to share their contact information on the WMATA partner.
Yeah, I think we can have somebody follow up. If you guys could take note of that, I think we could have Keith and maybe Maya from our bus team try to get that sorted out to get some of those answers.
Absolutely, we'll put it as an action item. Really great presentation. Thank you, Preston and DDOT. Okay, and someone has an attendee put a link in for everyone. Here's some info on the Better Bus project. So that is in the chat. People commonly park in the restricted bus stop space on the 1300 block of Marion Barry Avenue. Could you add a bulb out so people can safely board the bus in that space?
I would say we could take note of that and look into it. We have to keep in mind, just honestly, being able to move forward quickly and implement that in the timeline we want to, but I'm trying to think visually where that's at. We could take note of that when we're going through the design process and see if that's a potential. So thank you for that suggestion.
All right, thank you. And thanks, Keith. He did add the Marion Barry Avenue Corridor Safety Project link to the chat for anyone who wants to reference that. Comment, safe for all users. I love it. We've actually already addressed this. A moment. And Keith, thank you for your comment. Yes, you can enter a traffic safety input TSI request through 311 to follow up on Preston's comment earlier. Next question, could you please clarify parking plans for Marion Barry Avenue southbound during rush hour? The traffic is backed up on MB starting in mid-afternoon, so I don't understand why we're maintaining parking on that block, specifically during peak hour traffic times. Overall, commuting via bus is really stressful due to the traffic conditions, and the parking does not help.
Understood. Yeah, it's one lane in each direction except for this block. There's the two going towards where it's really the turning maneuvers, getting ready for the bridge. But by and large, for the corridor, my understanding from that corridor project that I think you said Keith might have just dropped the link into at one point, it's one lane in each direction, is my understanding. So that's what we used as the base condition, because separately we know that project is going forward and implementing more immediate term stuff. We wanted to envision a future on top of that of what the more beautified, revitalized version of that might look like. So it is one lane in each direction. maybe we might be able to follow up and have somebody that knows more about that specific comment and related to that project, but I do know that's the plan.
All right, thanks, Preston. And Julia says, hi, Preston. Hoping you can come back to a HABA meeting in February to provide another update. Thanks again to you and DDOT. Excited for these safety improvements in our neighborhood. Thank you for working with the fire department. V Street is always a sticking point for us when responding to incidents. And that's from Chris Moore from the fire department. WMATA has not confirmed any new bus stop placements. And this is Maya. Thank you for putting that link in the chat as well. And then the last thing we have is DDOT, please, needs to, I'm sorry, I think it's a piece missing, but DPW, or I guess it's partner maybe with DPW on enforcing the bus lanes in the evening.
Yes, we have notes on that one for sure. We were out on the Monday community walk. I know Keith also definitely took note of that. So yeah, we hear that one for sure.
All right, and that's the last question I have in the chat. I'll just make another round. Are there any other questions from any of our participants? I don't see any hand raises either. Let's see. Just making sure one more time, any other questions or comments? Okay, Preston, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to the community advisory group, to the folks from different council member offices and the ANC, the BID, all of you here that attended this meeting. Thank you so much for working with us on this project. Your feedback has been really helpful and really important to getting to where we're at. We're so happy to get to this final recommendation. We will have a final report that we'll post to the website, but we're excited to get to the point to implement. We want to get some safety stuff done, so we're really excited for that. So thank you so much. And then I just want to also really say thank you so much to our consultants, to Stacy, Patrice, Alec. We couldn't have done this without our full project team. So thank all of you internally and externally so much. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And I believe, Gabe, did you raise your hand? Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, thank everybody for joining the meeting tonight. And then secondly, I just want to make you aware of the fact that the camera on the bridge, the AT on the bridge, is going to be operational between January and February 2025. So I don't want anybody to get a ticket coming back to town.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any other questions or hand raises. So with that, this concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody, happy holidays to you.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.